because it may be a surprise love letter in there for you. It may be a surprise gift in there for you. I'm not going to tell you what all is in there, but just make sure that you don't look at nothing and just think it's paper and sit it to the side. Okay. Um, we also have the third eye stickers that we give you. And I want to remind you that that barcode on there is for you to use your phone so that you can follow us everywhere that we are. Okay. And inside your orders, for those of you who place your orders prior to today, you will also have a special invitation from us to join us in NUUMS Mystery School. Now, there's a class that will begin tomorrow, and I'm going to be teaching you how to use everything in your detox boxes and beyond. So anything that you ordered from us in NUUMS Mystery School, we teach you different ways to use it to continue your healing journey and to have tools that are actually proven and effective that we use ourselves to transmute and transcend trauma and triggers. We will also be teaching how to clear chakra imbalances using our products, the elixirs, the potions, and the pendulums. We will also be teaching how to use dowsing rods in NUUMS Mystery School. So if you have been thinking about it and you're like, oh, if that sounded juicy to you, then your inner being is telling you, you know, what you're ready for. So it doesn't matter if you're just beginning the journey of spiritual awakening or not. We have something for everybody, and there's more than one way to become a new, better version of you, and that's what we strive to do. I am sounding like Dr. Seuss once again, but so keep going. This is really not on purpose. I don't know what's going on. And we will also make sure that the link to enroll in NUUMS, that's what we call it for short. We on some clear quartz culture shit, people that want to be leaders and culture creators in their divine selves and not follow anything. So the link for you to enroll will be made available for you in the chat. And we have a few spots open. So for those of you who didn't place orders and maybe you didn't get those surprise gifts that we're going to teach you how to use in class tomorrow, we got a few spots still open. So if you want to join us, make sure that you click that link so that you can join us. Now that I have said that, a few more things. We want to shout out to some of you specifically because we are huge believers in giving people their flowers while they are here. Shout out to Keys. Keys, you have been very supportive and we appreciate you from day one. Anything that we're doing, you have been a part of it. You've been so consistent. And we love seeing the growth and the transformation that you're experiencing. So shout out to you.
Yeah.
Go. Shout out to Corey.
Yeah.
Smoke
Yes.
Lolita for being kind of like one of the new riders, but Lolita be on it. She do her homework. She take the time out to meditate, to read. She read through the posts that we send, like we see the activity, because this is about creating a tribe, a sacred space for us to be able to evolve, you know. So shout out to you and thank you so much for your donation. Like you have no idea how much you blew my heart chakra open today with the message that I saw on Mighty Networks. So shout out to you, Lolita. Shout out to Vernita. Thank you, Vernita. You come through at times where I'm not even expecting anything at all but problems from the universe because it just be like that sometimes. And you'll just do something and it'll put a smile on my face. And it's beautiful. So shout out to you, Vernita. We thank you. She another day one. She's been rocking with us for a minute.
Yeah.
Shout out to Aaron. We hope that you are doing well wherever you are.
Yes.
And anybody that we may have missed, thank you for energetically supporting our tribe by engaging and participating in our events. and know that you are truly loved and appreciated. And when we say this, it's because we mean this. Now, we can get into the juicy stuff because this is some of the most deep things that we have experienced as being twin flames. And this information is not coming from people who are licensed psychologists. I just want to let you know so that we're being responsible. These are experiences that we have had. So quick disclaimer, the following information and references to childhood neglect and abuse, as well as other situations that some people may find upsetting or triggering. We are not licensed mental health professionals, and we cannot diagnose anyone with any type of mental health condition, nor can we prove any type of professional support. But there are resources that we are going to give you where you will be able to find any support that you need from someone who is well trained in trauma. And that link will be made available to you. If not, see it now, we'll make sure that we get that link to you in the chat. Okay. Because some of the information we're using for tonight, a website that's kind of like my go-to when I'm searching for different ways to approach my personal trauma. All right. So we're going to dive deep. Let's decode codependency. Let's get into how to become a high value man, a high value woman, and begin pulling ourselves away from our addiction to external validation. And when I say codependency, if this is a new term for you, because Ernest expressed to me that prior to our relationship, these were words that just wasn't in his conversation. It wasn't in his realm of awareness. Uh, so I want to go through what it is so that we'll have a foundation to get into the conversation later. Because if you have children or anything, it's for grown folks. You know, I'm definitely keeping it 1,000 wild up in here right now. So you might want to put on some headphones or something later in the show, because this is a space where I'm able to fully express and yeah, just be my grown woman self and allow this transcended part of me to just come through pure and genuine. Because I think I might have a couple of jokes towards the end. We don't want it to be heavy. It don't shadow work don't have to be transcending your trauma and triggers doesn't have to always be painful. And yes, so you'll get to experience some of what I'm talking about today. Because at one point I was like, what? Shadow work is always painful. But it's not. It's a way that you can tap into the bliss of shadow work. What is codependency? For those of you who may be wondering, what is codependency? Do you tend to put your partner's needs above your own? Just let that sit in for a minute. Does your mood shift based on your partner's mood? You can put coworker in there. You can put sibling in there. You can put children, your partner. I know a lot of people are single because they're working on themselves, and that's so beautiful. So many of us do that before we got in relationships, and that avail is down in the age right now. So, yes, the next thing that you can ponder to see if codependency may be something often forsake your own well-being for your partners, putting most of your energy into supporting them more than yourself. If that's the case, you may be in a codependent relationship. So codependence refers to a repeated pattern of behavior that involves prioritizing the needs of others over your own. You may have started the relationship not intending to become so dependent on the other person, but lately that wants have slowly taken a back seat to theirs. This doesn't just happen in romantic relationships, as I said before. This can happen with our friends, oftentimes with our family and coworkers, in our community, the Black and Brown community. It was almost as if no matter what your family did, you had to be okay with it. You had to suck it up and be okay with it. What's happening? Okay. Oh, okay. I thought she was asking a question. So for me, I shared this publicly with y'all when I noticed some of the toxic patterns in my own bloodline. I made the decision to go no contact with my family, and that was one of the hardest things that I have ever done. Give me 1 second to make sure that our audio is still good. Okay. So some of the common codependency signs can include this because you don't have to go no contact like I did. Okay. I'm just going to give you the signs. But for me, it was that serious because of my health, because I had given so much energy and not taking care of myself. Going no contact was to save my life. Okay. So everybody's situation is different. So I'm not telling nobody to do that. You know, that's just what it came down to for me to be able to heal. So I want to give you some common signs of codependency and what they include. A tendency to ignore or minimize your own feelings. So many of us were not allowed to have our own feelings about things. And this is not to blame anybody. It just is what it is. And we've been through a lot of things and we have a lot of different traumas that we're healing, you know. So the people that raised us, they're not perfect. You know, they had things too, and they had pains and experiences that just destroyed their heart and broke them. So this is not blaming anyone. This is just from a space of acknowledging facts. Okay. And so if you weren't allowed to express the way you felt in your home, or maybe you were raised in a home where that was considered negative or going against the grain, I know for us, it was more so be seen and not heard type of thing. That's what children are supposed to do. So with that being said to us so much, it was almost like, okay, let me make sure that I'm not doing anything except you can see me, and you just minimize your own feelings because you begin to feel like what I feel don't matter. I just need to be okay with being seen, but not being heard. Okay. Another sign of codependency is doing things you don't want to do to make the other person happy. Now, that gets deep. For so many of us, we were taught by the women before us, for those of us who resonate with that feminine energy and it was impressive upon you, our mothers typically did anything they could to keep their men happy. And sometimes that meant being the last ones to eat dinner, where they would cook and they would be on their feet for hours, but they would make sure everybody ate first and they would be the last ones to eat. And I remember seeing that. And I remember saying to myself, is that don't seem like love? Like they're not taking care of themselves, you know? And if you grew up seeing that in your family as well, then you probably took on that condition and felt almost as if it was normal. Or even worse, you felt like that was how a woman was supposed to be in a relationship. And so for those of us who grew up with any type of religious experience, we were taught to also do anything for your partner and don't withhold your body from them at all. Don't ever do that. And if you do it, don't do it for too long because the devil might get a foothold within your relationship and destroy your relationship. So for a lot of us, we grew up having sex even when we really didn't want to, because we were told this is what you have to do to keep a man. So this is another aspect of the codependency and how in society from many different levels we have been programmed to be this way and call it love. Another one is a tendency to apologize or take the blame to keep peace and avoid conflict. Now, I know y'all like, hold on now. I thought, but that's me keeping the peace. Well, yes, it's you keeping the peace, but it's also you not acknowledging and taking care of your own self, speaking your own truth, and allowing yourself to be blamed, allowing yourself to be in an environment that feels uncomfortable, intense, and awkward, but you don't want to say nothing because you don't want to cause conflict. And for those of us who have the wounded child archetype, maybe of the rescuer or the perfectionist, you have a strong tendency to do anything that you can, usually subconsciously, to avoid conflict. We don't even know we're doing it most of the time because this is subconscious conditioning. The next one is an excessive need to get approval from others. I I took that one to the extreme. And it just was something where if people did not approve of me, it was a reminder of the times when I was a kid that I did not feel accepted and approved of. And because that was so uncomfortable, I became a people pleaser. And I would fake nice to keep myself safe. Because if you disapprove of me, it could potentially mean me getting kicked out of the house. That was my reality. It could potentially mean me having to experience being yelled at and called names and talked bad to, really hurtful things. And so it just didn't feel safe. And I became a people pleaser to keep myself safe. Another sign was changing your mood to reflect how others feel or behave. I'm sure a lot of us can relate to that.
Mhm.
Excessive concern about that person's habits or behaviors. Again, that was one I took to the max. I am a child of parents that dealt with alcoholism and drug addiction. And so, because of that, if I'm experiencing my partner and observing him do things that I feel like could potentially lead to a problem, if it get out of control, then I would excessively be concerned about it, and I would obsessively search for solutions and ways to avoid that outcome. And it was purely childhood conditioning where I had to learn how to separate the past from what's really happening in the present moment. Another one is experiencing guilt or anxiety when doing something for yourself. Ladies, I know, especially for those of us who are mothers, we do so much for our children. We try our best to show up for our man, but I'm not gonna lie to you. When we do something for ourselves, sometimes you almost feel like you're being selfish. If you go get a massage, you almost feel like you're being selfish. You know, I will go get my hair did and I will try to hair up and get back home to make sure dinner is done and whatever the family might need because I was uncomfortable with feeling like I was being selfish. And I would feel guilty about it. If I spent money to buy myself a pair of shoes, and it's not that the kids don't have any, but their shoes might be 2 months old, I would feel guilty about it, right? And be like, my shoes 1 day old and they shoes 2 months old. And I would get home and hear the thoughts like, you so selfish. So this creates internal dialogue where you hear these toxic thoughts over and over again about yourself. And that's going to lead to you needing validation from somebody outside of you because you can't cultivate it within yourself. The next thing was a sense of self-worth and self-esteem that depends on what others think of you. I took that to the max because I was bullied. So it was like my self-esteem is based on what other people think about me. And I need to make sure that people don't think anything negative about me. And it just caused my self-worth to plummet, you know. Um, the another one is taking on more work than you can handle to lighten someone else's load. Is anybody relating to any of this? Can you drop something in the chat? Like, are you related to any of this? Have I found at least one that you have experienced yet?
Mhm.
And I want to say this too before we go further. If this is triggering conversation for you, I want you just to remember that we're the generation that have soul contracts to clear some of the things in our bloodlines that have been traumatic for us. So you interacting with us in this space now is transcending your trauma. So if you feel the trigger come up, just know that that's a beautiful thing, and that's healing when it comes to the surface. Healing cannot happen without feeling what you are healing. Okay. So, as much as we've been getting triggered lately, just know that it is a very beautiful thing on the other side of that trigger, every single one of them. And I'm going to get into showing you how to tap into the beauty on the other side of your trigger. Several factors can contribute to creating these habits that I've mentioned. Childhood trauma and past relationships with your parents or caregivers may play a huge role in codependency. If your codependent behavior begins to interfere with your daily life, consider reaching out to a mental health professional. And I'm telling you, I have done this myself since I was 18 years old. So you may not have heard me talking about this as much as I am now, because it really took time for me to get in a space where I wasn't ashamed to talk about my mental health journey. And when I learned how powerful it is to accept and embrace your journey, you become a much better version of yourself, because you begin to see the beauty in the things that once were only traumatic experiences. And this is transcending trauma. All right. Now, codependency, it isn't a formal diagnosis, because when I first found out, even my therapist didn't know as much as I knew about codependency, because it's not a formal diagnosis. And so sometimes mental health professionals who are just going by the book, the DSM, um, they may or may not know as much about these specific things. So those are the things we like to bring to your attention and share and talk about, because sometimes you can definitely feel defeated when you finally make the steps to get some counseling or some therapy, and maybe they don't know as much about this. So a great thing that you can do if this is resonating, if you are open to working with a therapist or already are, just to ask them, like, how much do you know about codependency? And because if this is resonating with you and you're dealing with this, it's okay that if you can't heal this all by yourself, like there's no judgment for that. And the judgment is actually what keeps us feeling shameful, guilty, suffering, and feeling lonely. It's the judgment. And if we release the judgment from within ourselves, you become the point of attraction to invite more people into your reality that's not judgmental either. And you'll stop even caring about what people think, because you're surrounded with people who have a similar frequency where they are working to transcend these things. Okay. So, with the right support, you can learn how to manage this, and you can even build fulfilling friendships and relationships. And that's why we're talking about this, and we're going to get into this. So, if I still did not say anything that has resonated with you, and I doubt very seriously if anyone that ever hears this podcast will say, nope, none of it resonated. Because I tapped into the collective and was like, what is the thing that we experience in this cycle that's holding us back? And this was what came up every single time. Okay. So let's go over 10 characteristics of a codependent person.
Okay, so 10 characteristics of a codependent person. Tendency to minimize or ignore your own needs. I did that a whole lot to my detriment, and still learning how to shake free from those episodes when they come up now. So it's always a work in progress.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to shift out of that, depending on why you in it. But it can be difficult and challenging to shift out of that. And even though we already went over all of these, I just, in case Ernest want to chime in and share some specific ones for him.
Yeah.
But listen and see what you feel for you too. Because you got some others that really stuck with you.
Yeah. The same neglecting needs and desires to satisfy those of others.
Now that's interesting because most people feel like men don't really do that. Most people perspective of men is that y'all just, you think about you and you go do you. That's what we say. All men, they go do them. And it's true. Y'all are more self-sufficient in that way, more self-preserving to make sure you okay. It's mostly the women that take it to the super extreme.
Yeah.
But how did that show up for you?
Over times past, that's been something that talked about because I don't know why that's the norm, and you earlier, but like leaving the house, like yesterday, y'all left the house, so, like, because
I need you to tell me before you leave that you leaving, baby, even though I done left 1,000 times and ain't said a word to you. I actually did it 5 days ago. Yeah.
The tendency to we'll dot the door just like that, and when I'm saying I might leave, and you here with the baby or whatever, and I don't say nothing, but you have.
I can't get up and do that. Because she ain't gonna eat until
She will.
she's hungry. Yeah, eventually.
Yeah.
But you ain't gonna be able to hop in the kitchen.
I ain't gonna stay.
I got
Yeah,
a
yeah,
pre-prepared meal for you right here.
yeah. It's hard for me to stay on the schedule like how you stay
Right.
on the schedule. Yeah. So yeah, that putting others before having the tendency to put others before yourself. Yeah, that's
Do you
collective
think
mind.
society actually set up a standard where women was expected to set their feelings and needs aside, and maybe men just kind of by default?
I think
Women always take care of everything. I ain't got to tell her I'm leaving every time I leave. She got it.
yeah,
I'm sure
yeah.
whatever I'm going to the store to get, there's nothing in that store that she might need.
So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I definitely think it's an unspoken just uh whether you want to call it an expectation that we place on the role. I put it out.
Actually, that's the next one up on the number 10
Yeah, yeah.
about the expectations.
Okay, okay.
Because those are other signs of codependency, right?
Yeah.
Having a fear of rejection or making decisions for others to manage the other person's expectations. Wow. When it comes to expectations, y'all, a lot of us, what we learn about relationships, let's keep it real. Who taught you how to be in a relationship? Who set you down and said, as a feminine dominant being, we're not talking about like gender preferences, we're talking about energy. Okay. So if you resonate with someone who has more feminine traits and characteristics, who taught you how to be in a relationship? Who told you that you also have a masculine part of you, and that part of you must be active in the relationship? Now, I present the question to men, masculine dominant individuals. Who taught you how to be in a relationship without losing yourself or doing any of the things that we discussed? Can y'all drop that in the chat? Did anybody, maybe somebody else had these lessons? I don't know. But for us, it seemed like we was kind of flying blind.
Was it a a building block stage where you was taught it, or was it just you saw the example and now looking back you can realize that's what it was? You know what I'm saying? Time when you think about
No, and even worse, and I'm not gonna get too deep into this because I know that this is a subject that deserves a podcast all on its
it,
own. And I can definitely illuminate in certain areas and subjects as to how we got in this space we're in now. But for those of us who grew up watching Disney movies, my expectations for the person that I was with was basically predicted through watching Disney movies. And it was almost like he was either going to be my knight in shining armor, he was going to be a king, and he was going to come and save me from this traumatic life I'm experiencing, where it seems like nobody else feels the way I feel about what's happening in life. So that was my expectation, was to have a knight in shining armor, because that's what was put in front of me. And even if we go back to like Romeo and Juliet, and go back to Shakespeare, if maybe you didn't watch Disney. If you did none of that, maybe you grew up with hip hop, and
like
that created your relationship expectation.
yeah, and I think that media has this way of programming, period. And so, like you said, that was a part of the program. You know what I'm saying? For young ladies to want that knight in shining armor. You know what I'm saying? And then on the flip side of that, I can remember when Roger Rabbit came out, and it was just
And I was like, oh, okay. So to get this knight in shining armor, I need to be more sexually appealing. And literally that year, I wouldn't, because I used to dress like a boy. And Betty Boop, she was another definitely very strong media programming tactic that was used. But I remember saying, I got to be sexier. I was probably what, 15 when I realized I wasn't sexy enough. And that was right around the year that I'm Too Sexy for My Shirt came out. And I never remember, I was watching it on MTV and late at night. And I was up when I wasn't supposed to be. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to school sexy after summer over. And I had, my boobs and stuff had finally filled in. I was feeling myself, and I always dressed like a boy. I grew up around a lot of boys. And I went to school and I had my bell bottoms on. I had some tight bell bottoms and one of those little 70s crop tops. And people had never seen me embracing my feminine energy that way. So even though the intention was to be more sexually appealing, uh, it had an impact I did not expect. And when I walked into school, like no cap, I had so much attention. I went back in the bathroom, was like, I need to go home and give me another outfit because this is too much. It was too much. I mean, people's mouth was falling open.
Yeah.
It was, I had never seen me in their life. So I started back dressing like a boy and, just straight thug, dude, big pants, cross colors. That was all I wore. And I had a pair of Patrick Ewings that my ex-boyfriend bought me. I probably was 14. And so I was like, I'm just gonna start and put my kicks back on, and because he was even shocked. He was like, oh my God, like what is happening? Yeah. So the next day I didn't do it again because I didn't realize that I had trauma, and it was having that much attention was traumatizing for me.
Yeah.
So I'm just sharing this story with y'all so you can see like this stuff really starts to show up early with the condition.
I think, and a thought came to me, even growing up, we have the tendency we want to be in like it ain't just you by yourself. You wanna get to a place to where you have some friends. That's the whole codependency, because we be longing for that. When you're young, you don't just up and be like, I'm gonna go to the mall and hang out by myself. You gonna call a few guys, you gonna call your boys up. you know, it was rare.
So it's almost like you couldn't even go by yourself. Right. See? Okay, so that's a good thing to segue us. Anybody relating to this? Because we got so many stories we can tell you, but we want to move through into the deeper aspect of, well, where the hell does the codependency come from? Why do we get like that? So there's something called complex PTSD. Okay. And it's a little different than PTSD, but I'm going to read a little bit about this for you. Complex PTSD can occur from any traumatic situation that is prolonged. Okay. So regular PTSD versus complex PTSD, they vary. Regular PTSD in that it is usually caused by repeated exposure to trauma over an extended period of time. That's why it becomes complex. Okay. And one of the biggest risk factors for developing complex PTSD is the repetition of different childhood abuse situations, neglect. And it don't always have to be somebody like actually putting their hands on you or anything like that. Think about it as a child. You are super sensitive to the people who are your caregivers. And if they are working a whole lot, you may take that to mean I don't matter, and you may feel like you're being neglected. So I just want to chime in and say that because everybody's experiences of trauma is different, right? And so if there were, let's just say over the course of 3 years, you had a parent working two jobs, and for that time you really needed them for some social and emotional um, support, and they had to work to support financially and pay the bills. Well, that leaves a child to wonder, like, what's going on with me that my parent can't be here with me to help me through this. And then when they say, well, we putting food on the table and clothes on your back, and it's like, okay, well, I have to accept that. That means something. We need food, we need clothes, we need this. And so we began to split in remnants and fragments right there. And you start compartmentalizing what these different things mean in your life.
Yeah.
So some of the additional symptoms that are unique to complex PTSD include difficulty with emotional regulation. It is very common for survivors of complex trauma to experience emotional flashbacks. Emotional flashbacks are intense and they're confusing episodes of fear, toxic shame, or despair, which often are a recurring event or feeling that is actually connected to the original triggering event. So the intense feelings of explosive anger, persistent sadness, depression, and suicidal thoughts may be disproportionate to the present situation, but are equal to the intensity of what was required of them at the time of the original trauma. And a great example of emotional flashback that comes to mind is sometimes because I do have a past trauma of molestation and sexual abuse. If someone touches me and I didn't feel them walking up behind me, it can live like I literally feel like I'm jumping out of my skin, and it just spooked the shit out of me. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like I didn't even know he was right there. And it's not like that person is doing anything to me, but the amount of intensity that I feel inside my body from being touched, unwarranted, the person didn't ask or give me a heads up. Then I go back to the original moment when I had those experiences.
Right.
Yeah. And so I immediately go into fight or flight, or I freeze up and I can't even say nothing or move or anything. I'm just like, and I'm processing this. So something that you can do when you have emotional flashbacks is just take a pause, take a breath and be like, wait a minute, is this present situation really evoking this much intensity where I don't feel safe and somebody is trying to hurt me or disrespecting my boundaries? Or is this just something that's connected to things that happen to me? And once you can acknowledge that and you can say, hey, when you are coming in the house and I don't hear you, and if you walk up behind me, instead of grabbing me, speak to me first, and ask me, hey, babe, can I get a hug? And then we can kind of ease into that. And then I don't get triggered to that point. And this is something that me and Ernest had to work through in our relationship, because I've been working on myself for so long. I'm able to explain to him what's happening inside of me, what part of that has absolutely nothing to do with him, and we can work through it better. That way, he doesn't have to take it personally, because in the beginning, that's how it felt for him. Like, dog, I can't just walk in the house and grab you and hug you. And I'm like, that's a boundary for me. It takes me back to the intensity of those emotions. And so the more that you heal and do shadow work and get to know these parts of yourself and release the judgment of the parts of you that maybe you're not too proud of, the more you'll be able to isolate as well and create healthy boundaries around these things that trigger these intense emotional flashbacks, just the way I described to you.
You just said, I was thinking, and that is the idea of boundary. Um,
Which we getting into that pretty deep tonight. We got a whole section on boundaries. I actually sent you something that resonated a lot, because for so many of us, especially if you are an empath, like if you resonate with a lot of things that we do, most likely there's a part of you that's very empathic, whether you're aware of it or not. And what happens, I want to share with you, Pete Walker was just one of my favorite authors when I first started this journey of learning these things. And I'm going to share with you the next sign of complex PTSD, which is having a altered self-perception. So people with CPTSD often have a sense of being completely different from other people and feel helpless, guilty, or ashamed. Pete Walker writes, perhaps there was no more detrimental consequences of our childhood abandonment than being forced to habitually hide our authentic selves. Many of us come out of childhood believing that what we have to say is as uninteresting to others as it was to our parents. This is the feeling that I described in the beginning, and one that is very common to most people living with CPTSD. Now, there are other books, and we're going to definitely give you some resources. One of my favorite books is that The Body Keeps Score. You can just search for this, The Body Keeps Score. Search for that book. So many others, and I've got a lot of information to share, so I want to work through this. But The Body Keeps the Score, and you can find that book. It's probably on Audible, and just listen to it if you would like to learn more about how it gets stored within the body. And so, if you have an altered sense of who you are based on your conditioning, it does make it more difficult to be in a relationship with somebody else, because you're not quite sure where you begin and where they end, where they begin and where you end. And you end up enmeshed with them because you're not quite sure who you are, what you want. And maybe you haven't been confident enough to express that, like, this is who I am, these are my needs, this is what I want. So all of those things can be signs of CPTSD. That's something we need to. Okay. So another one is difficulty, dealing with other people, difficulty being in relationships on every level. Survivors often either avoid relationships completely or develop unhealthy relationships because of past experiences. This can lead to further trauma as they repeatedly find themselves in toxic relationships. So, the next one is no system of meaning. A system of meanings is the thing that people look to when facing uncertainty in life. This can include core beliefs, values, religious faith, or hope in the world and other people. A child with parents who are unable or unwilling to provide safe enough attachment. Okay. If anybody is on and you have any trouble with audio, if you let us know in the chat. Okay. But a child with parents who are unable or unwilling to provide safe enough attachment has no one to whom they can bring into developing their whole selves. No one is there for reflection. There's really no one there for validation and guidance. No one is safe enough to go to for comfort or help in times of trouble. Oftentimes, there is no one to cry to or to protest unfairness to and to seek compassion from others for hurts, mistakes, accidents, and betrayals. And I can remember making mistakes in things like wasting something. Woo, you better not waste something on the wrong day. You waste something on the wrong day, and you have a parent that hasn't reached this level of healing within themselves, that can trigger their trauma, and they'll just, release a lot of negative energy because they're triggered by you wasting stuff. And sometimes you might even hear things like, stop being so clumsy. Why are you so clumsy? You clumsy just like your clumsy daddy. Or, you dumb just like your mom. And this is it right. Sit your ass down. Don't go back in my kitchen. And you just take that energy on, and we thought that it goes away because we get older, but it's still inside of you. Your inner child is always inside of you, will always be inside of you.
Because we didn't have no way to figure out how to process that at the moment that it occurred.
Mm-hmm. So these are just some of the things, and again, this helps you to not have to feel as lonely from the way that maybe you starting to perceive some of the things that happened to you when you was growing up. And again, this is a space where it's so much liberation when you're able to look at it and say, huh, that's true. And you see you're not alone. It's not just you. And nobody, this doesn't mean people are bad people. It doesn't, we're just human, and we're having this experience to tap into our divinity. So another thing was, what about being safe to actually like show and tell, like be proud of yourself, right? You, it's almost like if you was too proud of yourself, it was too much. And it was like, calm down then. You ain't that good. I can remember hearing that and being like, but this is phenomenal. And it's like, yeah, but you don't want to be arrogant and cocky, you know. Um, it wasn't intentional, but for a long time, it wasn't safe for Black and brown people, especially here in America, to be seen. And that translated on a subconscious level where we would dim ourselves and dim our light. And somebody might compliment you and be like, that's beautiful and that's amazing. You'd be like, it's all right. And that's not you, it's just the conditioning you grew up with. So sometimes we can look back and see that there was no one for us to practice being intimate with. So having skills, building skills for intimacy and conversations, oftentimes we didn't get that. We didn't see it. And if we did see it, maybe the attention was more on the negative parts and not the positive, right? Because when you live in poverty, or if you grow up in bad neighborhoods, or if you had any experiences with the civil rights movement, like those things may have happened in the past, but we now know that time and space is not a linear thing, and it's multidimensional. And so sometimes those things come up and they're triggered within us on an energetic level. And it can make it difficult to be intimate, like for real. Right. So maybe from talking to clients, I would hear this, and this particular therapist who I follow talked about this, and he said that talking to his mom was like giving ammunition to the enemy. Anything I said could and would be used against me. No wonder people always tell me that I don't seem to have much to say for myself. And that again was by Pete Walker. And I'm sure y'all can relate to that too, because sometimes mama, we can stick with a mama for now. You can put whatever fits, but they might ask you a few questions, and then a week later, and you like, I don't feel like going to school today. I ain't feeling good. And it's like, yeah, but no, the other day you weren't feeling good, and you asked me to go to the mall with your friends, and I let you win. So you get your ass up and go to school. And like you really had the flu or pneumonia or something, was really, really sick, and get to school, and teacher be like, oh, you need to come pick them up. They can't be at school sick like this and have everybody in class sick. And boy, that ride home, most likely that ride home was not a skip in the park. I didn't have to take off work. You know, I had to work overtime. You know what I'm saying? I had to take off work, come pick your ass up. Why you sick? And so it was like trying to
Stay at home, then.
yeah. You want to let me stay at home. Boy, shut up. It was not to be seen and not heard.
Man.
And and so you wonder like what's going on with me in my relationships now? What does connect to? That's just another example. So oftentimes, because of the amount of trauma that we experience, we start detaching from our own selves just to try to regulate some of the anxiety, the fear, the hurt, the pain, the anger that you may feel. So we're going to get into detachment from the trauma.
A person may disconnect from themselves or depersonalization and the world around them, derealization. Some people might even forget their trauma completely. As complex trauma occurs over a long period of time, it usually leaves survivors completely overwhelmed by the effects. This leads to a constant feeling of being unsafe and helplessness, which can also cause frequent issues later in life. When the trauma is being inflicted by someone that the victim relies on to survive, like a parent or something, it can create mixed signals about the need to connect versus the need for safety. Repeated exposure to these types of confusing messages in childhood can actually cause permanent changes in how our brain structures develop.
Now that's interesting because I shared that experience, but learned helplessness is another trait that we pick up from feeling unsafe, right? And so for in your relationship, typically you're going to attract, especially if you're in a romantic twin flame reunion, like me and Ernest are, which is when two souls are drawn to each other to help each other evolve. That evolution is not a comfortable thing. The intention is to pull you out of your conditioning, which is always going to have some form of discomfort because it's not what you're used to. And so what will happen, he can go from 0 to 60 so quick. And after that, everything is great and it's peaceful and it's fine. And so over time, that happening, I realized that that's what I experienced growing up with my mom and daddy. And so I attracted him because my point of attraction was in that conditioning, and he was a vibrational match for me in that space. So that's the law of attraction, energetic side of these traumas, and um how they begin to impact our relationships as adults. So childhood and the inner child, healing that actually helps your relationships to be healthier on every level. Okay. What's the next part?
Dissociation and complex PTSD.
Mm. So with complex PTSD, again, we're kind of going into some of the ways it shows up. So as complex trauma occurs over a longer period of time, it usually leaves survivors completely overwhelmed by its effects. This leads to a constant feeling of being unsafe and helplessness, which can cause frequent issues later in life. That's where you stop there. That's where you. So what happens is you already, before you get a relationship, you already got your mind set up that it's probably going to go how it always went when you're looking at it through that lens. Until you detach from the effect of trauma, you will perceive everything through that trauma, right? So some detachment is help, and we will get into that as well, but sometimes you do have to pull away so that you can re-regulate your emotions before you continue the conversation or whatever may be happening.
Complex PTSD. When most people hear the term dissociation, they might think of the term multiple personalities. Personally, I pictured a commercial for that horror movie that came out a few years ago where the guy has multiple identities and they are all really creepy. The good news is that dissociation is not really like that. I think that the easiest way to think about dissociation is when your mind and your body have some sort of disconnect. This happens to everyone at some point, and it's not always bad. Have you ever been driving somewhere familiar and gotten to your destination only to realize you don't remember the drive at all? That's an example of dissociation. But in this case, your brain is disconnecting because it feels safe, not because it feels unsafe. In situations that are traumatic, however, your brain may disconnect because of immense feelings of feeling unsafe. This can cause people to be unable to recall their traumatic memories or to be able to recall traumatic memories vividly, but have no strong emotions attached to them.
Mm.
Dissociation is actually a healthy coping mechanism as long as it is not overused. When dissociation becomes someone's go-to coping mechanism or is being used in situations that are not appropriate, that is when it becomes concerning. There are 5 common types of dissociation related to trauma. As I stated earlier, depersonalization, derealization, amnesia, identity confusion, and identity alteration.
Now, just to jump in right quick, with these different types of dissociation, oftentimes when you look at the Black community, right, especially we're going through like this collective awakening. And so you'll see somebody 1 minute, and I can speak for myself too, because I'm still kind of figuring out what I identify with, what resonates with me. I might talk about Orishas in one moment and feel a strong connection to learning from reading and studying the information. And then the next season is more about ancient Kemet or ancient Egypt and learning more about Isis and learning more things about Horus and rebirth. And that's the identity alteration, because if you didn't get in touch with yourself, you're doing it now. So back in the day, we would look at it like people didn't know who they was, and like, look at you, you know, jumping from one belief to the other. You're jumping from one group of friends to the other. You're jumping from one church to the other. You're trying to jump from one hood to the other. You know, like you finna get jumped. We seeing you over there on the other side of town. You ain't even supposed to be rocking with them. This show up on almost every level, right? And what would happen sometimes, the way Ernest would dissociate from his own self, it would trigger me to feel unsafe because I could see that he wasn't sure about himself in that moment. And so in those moments when he is being triggered to give attention to certain aspects of him that have been repressed, I can see it and feel it as an empath. And it's not just me observing, but I'm actually feeling what he's not feeling in my body. And it was so mind blowing because I'm hyper vigilant, which means I'm always scanning my environment for things to let me know if I'm safe or not, and to be able to make any adjustments necessary to feel safe. So when he's in that space, sometimes what happens is he won't even remember something that he said to me or that happened between us in those moments. And these are moments where he would be severely detached from his own self. And so that's why he wouldn't remember. And I'm like, no, you said it. And like, no, I didn't say that. I didn't say that. And it drove me nuts for a little while. And I was just like, well, I wonder why the amnesia be hitting him like that. And I know why I get it, and it's because I block things out that's just too much for me to deal with. So this is all determined by your level of awareness of yourself too, and how much you observe yourself, non-judgmentally, just watching yourself, listen to your thoughts, you know. Um, so some of the therapies that I received for this, because I know the spiritual side of healing is important, but it does not minimize any other things. So DBT, which is dialectical behavior therapy, that helps us a lot. That's just something that you can use in conversation. And we'll share a couple of those phrases that you can use that's not going to make the situation feel more intense than it has to. Um, and also somatic healing, doing relaxation and breath work. It can also help you to get back in the body, get grounded and present. So when we created the root chakra potion, that was at a time where I was really needing to get grounded. And I had no idea that I had a vortex of energy that basically recorded my experiences. So my root chakra was recording those experiences throughout my life. And sometimes I would feel ungrounded and uncentered, and you automatically are going to react in a fight or flight way if you're not grounded. So, you know, shameless plug, but just know that the root chakra potion, it was born out of finding crystals and herbs and oils to use as aromatherapy, for massaging, things to help me get back in my body in a healthy way to be present and be grounded. With research, there are few things that are linked to complex PTSD, and it's showing up as a health problem. So here are a few of those: depression and anxiety, sleep problems, unexplained body aches and pain, including migraines, stomach and digestion troubles, and arthritis, type 2 diabetes, sexual difficulties, low energy and fatigue, and substance abuse. Now, there are even a lot more studies that have linked childhood trauma to an increased risk in all kinds of illnesses, including cancer, lung disease, and cardiovascular disease. Now, there has not been a lot of research on the intersection between PTSD and chronic pain, but there is a lot of evidence that's suggesting that those who live with regular PTSD are at increased risk for certain health issues. Okay. So I wanted to make sure I added that part because for a lot of us, when these health issues show up, sometimes your mind just goes to the physical and what's going on in the physical, but you don't want to skip over the energetics because ultimately everything in the universe is energy, frequency, and vibration. And so being able to seep down deeper into the energetic element of what's happening, it is super useful. And you will discover that maybe the headaches that you develop happens when you're in fight or flight, or when something has triggered you and you were unaware of how triggered you really were, and you repressed the intense emotions and it turned into a headache. Okay. So these are some of the things that you could just expand and be more aware of as you are going through your healing journey. Now, we touched on how trauma changes the brain, right? So we're going to read some of this to you. And very soon, we're going to be um, having the new Naga Saga and also with the NUUMS, New Mystery School classes tomorrow. I'm going into more of the energetic metaphysical aspect of the brain structure changes and some of the things that impacted us severely, like sugar being in everything we didn't know. That's more addictive than cocaine. So now that's a different level of substance abuse, and it was considered normal. And it was considered a gift that you give to your children on their birthday. That can impact the brain. Fluoride in the water can impact the brain. So these traumatic experiences on top of the substances, environmental things, and agendas by the powers that used to be the elite, these small group of bloodlines that attempt to control the masses. None of this stuff was by coincidence. Okay, we have been socially engineered to not love ourselves unconditionally. Because imagine how much we would rely on the things that have been set up to for the system. If we were more sovereign and more connected to these parts of ourselves, we wouldn't consume the way that we do. We wouldn't eat as much as we do, drink as much as we do. We wouldn't feel the need to buy designer things to try to look and feel better, to prove our worth. And it's so many other things I'm going to talk about, and also some of the secret projects. Okay, like Project Alimentarius, which is just one of the many that was used with the food to change the structure of the brain. So it wasn't just the fluoride, it's not just the lead that's still in some cities today in the water pipes, and they're still dealing with this, like Detroit. And so that's that platform over there is for people who want to know more about those things. So right now, not to pull away too much, I digress. Let's get into the brain structure and what happens when you experience trauma.
Okay. Um, a couple of areas: the brain structure, the nervous system, neural pathways, and it also kind of like talks about the neurotransmitters. But from the brain structure, long-term trauma leads to shrinkage in prefrontal cortex, corpus callosum, and the hippocampus. The ventromedial prefrontal cortex is a part of the brain that regulates emotions. Damage to this area of the brain due to trauma can cause an inability to regulate emotions like fear and anger. The damage can also lead to a stress response being activated in the absence of any danger.
Mm.
So that, that's the times when the scenario um, doesn't call for the actual emotional response that's being given to it. The corpus callosum connects the left and right sides of the brain. For those who have suffered trauma, the area is often reduced. This prevents the two sides of the brain working in a coordinated way. The hippocampus is responsible for storing and retrieving memories, while also differentiating between past and present experiences. Shrinkage in the hippocampus leads to an inability to regulate memories and differentiate between past and present. This can also have an impact on attention and learning. Survivors of complex trauma also usually have an enlarged and more reactive amygdala. The amygdala is in control of your stress response. An overactive amygdala makes you more susceptible to severe reactions. This might lead to chronic stress, heightened fear, and increased irritation. It might also make it harder for those suffering to calm down or even have healthy sleep. Now, how it affects the nervous system. Your autonomic nervous system has two big parts: the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. When you are faced with a threat, this activates the sympathetic nervous system. This is associated with the fight or flight response and the release of cortisol throughout the bloodstream. The sympathetic nervous system will communicate to the parasympathetic nervous system to slow down functions such as digestion in order to save energy for combating the perceived threat. The parasympathetic nervous system is supposed to put the brakes on the sympathetic nervous system when the time is right so that the body stops releasing stress chemicals and shifts back towards relaxation, digestion, and regeneration. For those who have suffered traumatic stress, however, they often have an overactive sympathetic nervous system. This means that they perceive threats even when there are none.
Did y'all hear that? So, just to jump in, not to cut you off, but sometimes when you're perceiving a threat, but you don't see anything physically in your now moment that makes it make sense, you will look for something and find something wrong so that you have something outside of you to connect it to make it make sense. You see, and so I would do this, and it would almost be like something must be wrong. I'm feeling like this. I'm feeling super irritated and triggered. Something must be wrong. He must be trying to do something that I asked him not to do and violate my boundaries. So let me go in here and look and see what he doing. And you'll create a whole story in your mind, and somebody might deliver some food and it's a young female and they went to school together. I'm on the Ring app looking. I'm like, damn, they sure been talking to each other for a long time. There's anything to make it make sense.
How many
Why
stories come up out of it?
create about 30 episodes in 3 seconds because your mind is a quantum computer, right? So sometimes if the perceived threat, you don't see anything, you will not only look for it, but you will create a problem just to make it make sense to you. Because at least you can say, well, this is the reason this is happening.
That's deep.
So with me and Ernest, he is more so on the side of what we would call high functioning Asperger's, which basically just means the brain development. They would call it autistic, but the brain development in certain areas is not there, and some of the neural pathways necessary for emotional regulation were not developed as well. So what would happen is I could compliment him about something, but in his mind, it would be perceived as a threat or a put down or me being critical. And that would happen so much to where I would be like, hey, babe, what's going on? Why you thought I was trying to put you down? No, I'm telling you, man, you cooked the hell out of that egg omelet the other day or whatever. And I'll say it just like that. And he'll be like, oh, so it was nasty, it was bad. And I'm like, it was delicious. Why did you download it like that? Oh, I just thought you was, and before I can even explain it, he's already made up a story in his mind that I'm doing something that maybe he experienced a lot.
I think I'll probably be on episode 6. Everybody, I'm all the way into the next season down there. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so trauma survivors are also shown to have an underactive parasympathetic nervous system. This results in difficulty turning off the stress response even when the threat has passed.
So the neural pathways is next. I'm going to get into this.
Those who have lived with repeated trauma need to rewire their brain from old thought patterns and habits of mind, whether conscious or unconscious. Trauma can cause changes in neural pathways. This can mean that survivors anticipate less pleasure from different activities and may appear less motivated. In addition, those who experience childhood trauma may experience an impact on their attachment style, which can lead to long-term health and social impacts. Children who grow up in chaos don't have a secure base and learn that they can't rely on their caregiver for comfort. This means that they struggle to calm themselves when threatened. If a child can't regulate their emotional state or rely on others to help them, their biological fight and flight freeze response is repeatedly triggered, which brings on neurotransmitters. Those that have suffered from long-term trauma are shown to have low levels in many key neurotransmitters. Studies have shown that trauma victims have low levels of serotonin, dopamine, and GABA or GABA. Low serotonin levels have been shown to lead to depression, problems with anger control, obsessive compulsive disorder, and suicide.
So as we can see here, it's so many different ways that this could show up. And it's really interesting how with mental health, that was something in the community we grew up in, the Black Brown community. It was like something you didn't talk about. It was perceived as a weakness. Like you need to see a psychiatrist. Like, what's going on with you? Like that's terrible. You shouldn't need that. You should be shamed. Don't be telling people that. Don't be.
That was the thing. That was the thing. Like you was crazy if it's crazy, but you was crazy if you had to go see.
You want to find somebody to help you work through those things.
Yeah, like,
And
oh,
like
nah,
I said, I
crazy.
started
He
at
crazy for
18,
real.
and people really thought that I was crazy. And people started telling me, you're just not going to church enough, and you're not praying enough, and you're not paying your tithes enough. And did you take communion? And are you fasting? Have you had sex? And so what happened was I got super critical of myself, and I just started to blame myself for everything. And it was almost like I felt shame because it's like, wow, so Jesus, Allah, or whatever it is y'all believe in, that worked for y'all. And people would be like, yeah, that worked. So I would try it for years and years and years and wouldn't get an outcome. And it left me feeling hopeless. And it left me feeling lost and alone. And I didn't feel safe to even share what I was experiencing and going through, which made the trauma worse. So in the course that we have religious detox, that was born from that. I actually reverse engineered some of the verses in the Bible that actually caused me to have less self-worth. And I felt like if I couldn't live up to the standards of God, and God has the capacity to love unconditionally, I must be a really fucked up person. And if I have to say that I have to repent for every single thing that I do. And sometimes it's just simple things like I'm turned on and attractive physically to somebody. And if my body has a response to that, then I was told that that was bad and evil, and you're supposed to repress that and shut that down. Pray about it. Don't do that. That's lust. It'll destroy you. So that made me feel like I needed to detach from what my body was communicating to me, which leads to you not really being able to identify how you're feeling. You see, after years and years and years. So, I know some people, the religious detox course is so much more than just religion, but it's actually just going into the programming that you received that created the conditions that you are now experiencing. And you see that there's some healing that I am required to pay attention to for myself to be better. So now that we got that out the way, let's talk about emotional abuse, because this is a huge part of people who have dealt with trauma. We don't abuse each other on purpose most of the time. Most of the time, it's unconscious. So while many of us learn how to spot and recognize physical abuse, emotional and psychological abuse is not always as easy to decipher. So there's a website, healthyplace.com. It defines emotional abuse as any act including confinement, isolation, verbal assault, humiliation, intimidation, infantilization, right? That's the baby boy thing. Man grew up and they lived in cribs. So it was even in the words and syntax that we were using that was keeping us in this immature state of being, which is why The Functionary by Dr. Blind is such a phenomenal thing to be able to use as your healing. And if you never heard of that before, that's okay. We'll go get to it at the end of this podcast. Or there could have been any other treatment which may diminish the sense of your identity and your dignity and your self-worth. All of these things are considered to be emotionally abusive. So they are hypercritical or judgmental towards you, and this includes behaviors such as putting you down, especially in front of other people, but especially in private as well. Humiliating or embarrassing you. That was normal growing up. Did something your parents didn't like, your ass will get embarrassed. You might get a whooping in front of the whole school. You know what I'm saying? Like that was our norm. Using sarcasm or teasing, just to make you feel bad about yourself. Like that was our norm, right? And so I could get into something that I know might be pretty touchy, but we go keep it real here, you know. As kids, we can be very brutal and we don't have a filter. And so we would check and pick on each other. And actually, it really wasn't always to fight or hurt each other. That was just how that energy showed up in a child who has not learned the things that we're just not learning now. So we picked on each other a lot. And we call it checking. Up north, they call it joning. You know what I'm saying? Getting rocked. And like this was something that is actually like a form of intimacy in our culture. You know what I'm saying? Like, hey man, hey, oh, big head ass, like, hey man, come. And, you know, and we would laugh. And I know to other cultures it looks strange on the outside looking in because I step out and look in. I'm like, that dude look a little crazy. And even as women, we'd be like, girl, why ain't you girl bring your ass over here, bitch? Look. And it sounds like an aggressive thing to hurt and put down one another, but we're saying it in a way where like that's so fucking amazing and awesome. I'm loving this. So, you know, it just shows that it is complex the way that we interact with each other. So some of the other things are ignoring boundaries or invading your privacy. Most of us didn't have privacy growing up. We didn't know what that was. So this includes things like wanting to move in a relationship faster than you are comfortable with, right? Emotionally or physically, right? And so somebody can be just pressing you and pressing you and pressing you to have sex with them or to kiss them or to let them have keys to your apartment or your house or when you go let me meet your parents, all these things. And you could feel pressure and just give in to it, especially if you tend to be codependent, empathic, or a highly sensitive person, you know. Checking your text messages, social media, or emails without your permission. I was an expert at that. If you did anything that caused me to not feel safe, I wanted to go and investigate and to make sure I was okay because I did not trust the masculine to be honest with me about what was going on based on my experiences. And some of the times I was right, and some of the times I wasn't. Some of the times my suspicion led to a truth, and sometimes it was just me bringing up intense emotions from the past into the present moment. Okay. Another emotionally abusive thing, and we have both noticed these things in our relationship. Okay. Being possessive and controlling. Now, this includes behaviors such as constantly calling or texting, getting upset when you want to hang out with your friends alone, or isolating you from other people, accusing you of cheating and being jealous of outside relationships, taking or hiding your keys so you can't leave, demanding to know where you are at all times, or using GPS to track your every move, treating you like a possession or property. Now, we know most women, we identify with being someone's property, right? As women in the patriarchy, this was the norm, to be a man's possession, to be his property. This is a norm even in what we call religion, where the father sold his daughter for a dowry. So you can pay me to have my daughter. And not only can you pay me a dowry to marry my daughter, but you're going to have sex right here. And we're all going to stand here and make sure that you bleed afterwards to make sure you are a virgin, so that that dowry don't have to get taken back. And, so if you didn't bleed when losing your virginity, this is in the Old Testament.
Yeah, TikTok.
It's like, no, I'm not paying for her. She was supposed to be a virgin. I paid you for a virgin wife. So you can see here that we typically were raised to be possessions in our relationships, and that was considered to be a norm. Even when you're having sex, and they're like, this mine, this mine, this mine. And I can remember the very first time the goddess in me really, really started speaking. It's like, oh, it's mine. I'm sharing with you right now. Sharing is caring, but this is mine. And it was just a huge moment where I realized, like, I'm not a possession. Right. I'm just sharing. No, but it's mine. No, it's mine. No, it's not yours. It's so yeah. What about criticizing or making fun of your friends, family, and coworkers? Sometimes, especially if they have high narcissistic traits, they can do that. We could do that. Being jealous and envious as a sign of love and to keep you from being with other people, or controlling your finances. So these are some other ways that it shows up. It shows up as manipulation, right? So this includes behaviors such as withdrawing affection when you've done something wrong, ignoring or excluding you, putting you on a guilt trip, making you doubt yourself, gaslighting, like telling you something and it's not really true, right? And so your intuition telling you something, and they like, no, that ain't true. I ain't text her, or I ain't call him, and you like, I feel this deep inside of my gut. And they like, I don't know what's wrong with you. You tripping. And then you find out later they lied to you. So that right there will cause a friction in your relationship. Denying something that you know is true. They often dismiss you and your feelings. They use emotional blackmail, or we. This includes behaviors such as manipulating and controlling you by making you feel guilty, humiliating you in public or in private, right? Using your fears, your values, compassion, or other hot buttons to control you or the situation, exaggerating your flaws or pointing them out in order to deflect attention or to avoid taking responsibility for their poor choices or mistakes, denying that an event took place or lying about it altogether. Then you want to share, babe? One of those stick out.
All of them stick out. All of them stick out. The manipulation sticks out.
Taking responsibility is a big one.
Yeah.
Especially if you feel like it was a bad decision. It's like, I'm already struggling with that inside of myself. Don't bring it up. No, I don't want to face that right now.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can anybody else relate to any of these? Drop something in the chat and let us know And shout out to y'all in YouTube land. We got y'all in here with us to have this joint experience tonight. But these podcast episodes will continue on Mighty Networks. So shout out to YouTube land, and you could drop us some love in the chat. Let us know if you're enjoying this information. Not really able to respond to the chat right now because I'm focused on giving you the information. But I just wanted to acknowledge y'all because we didn't at the top of the show. So yeah, peace and love and evolution to everybody. So another big one for me is acting superior and entitled. I got that one pretty good. That's me right there. So this might be you too. Let's go ahead and get into it and see. This includes behaviors such as treating you like you are inferior, blaming you for their mistakes and shortcomings, doubting everything you say and attempting to prove you wrong, making jokes at your expense, telling you that your opinions, ideas, values, and thoughts are stupid, illogical, or do not make sense, talking down to you, or being condescending. This is all an effect of experiencing trauma, y'all. But these things we often take very personally when it's happening to us. But when we on the other side of that drama triangle and we doing it, it's too uncomfortable to see. And this is why shadow work is such an amazing way to get more comfortable with these shadow aspects of you. But the condescending thing, like that's a struggle, for me. It comes out before I have the opportunity to adjust it. So, that was one that stuck out for me.
Create chaos. This includes behaviors such as starting arguments for the sake of arguing.
Ooh, I know I got somebody right there. They're like, that's me, that's me.
Making confusing, contradictory statements, sometimes called crazy making. Having drastic mood changes or sudden emotional outbursts. Nitpicking at your clothes, your hair, your work, and more. Behaving so erratically and unpredictably that you feel like you are walking on eggshells.
Honestly, y'all,
That's
like
what
that level of chaos right there with me and Ernest, we went into a phase in our twin flame reunion where I felt like it wasn't even walking on eggshells. I felt like I was walking on a high wire up on top of the World Trade Center to another building, and I couldn't make not one wrong move. You know what I'm saying? And it was like a minefield, and it at any point in time something could trigger a drastic mood change or a sudden emotional outburst in him, and he would deny it, and he would be like, no, I ain't say that. And I'm like, babe, you can be honest, you mad at me right now about what happened yesterday, and it came up today because we never did resolve it. And because sometimes he would be disassociated from his own self, he don't realize that that's what's happening. And after a little while, he's like, you know what? I sure was so upset about that. And I had not really released that situation. And I just found a reason for it to come out and went 0 to 60. And that's how it was.
Yeah. Yeah. So you would say your experience would be like that. Mine would be like ice skating on the sheet of ice when you hear it crack.
Mhm.
One statement and it just shatters everything and I fall in and I'm frozen. I just freeze up and you ain't getting nothing out of me at that point.
Yeah, complete shutdown, no communication. He like he's almost in a state of not being able to have a conversation with me about whatever the situation is. And what we do is we take a break. And it's something that we call the 4 R's. And we take a break and we relax and we rejuvenate, and we bring the conversation back to the table to find the resolution. So we're going to be teaching so much of this stuff in much more detail as we go through these podcasts. But we're trying to graze through some more information. So one of the other ones that came up a lot for us was engaging in gaslighting. Okay.
When abuse makes you feel as though you are crazy, or if an event never happened, or if as if an event never happened. This can be through various tactics, such as denying an event ever happened, calling you crazy or overly sensitive, or describing an event as completely different from how you remember it. Gaslighting is a form of emotional abuse that abusers use to maintain power and control. When a victim is questioning her memories or her mind, she may be more likely to feel dependent on the abuser and stay in this relationship.
And as much as we want to see ourselves as being our ascended, our divine selves, and we have arrived, right now on a collective level, we're learning how to be in relationships, and being in the Libra season and finding harmony and balance ultimately is key, which is what inspired the show. Y'all voted for it. Every single podcast will be something that we have already had discussions with y'all about, and information that we could share with you to help you on this journey. So how y'all feeling out there? Y'all all right out there? Everybody all right? Drop something in the chat. Y'all see, don't be getting quiet on us now. Y'all be having a lot to say. I be reading and looking for y'all comments on other channels, and I go on Instagram and see what you're posting. And I know y'all love to talk about relationships. It's just the highest form of alchemy and learning. So yeah, if any of this resonated with you, we're going to share a link with you. And like I said, you can go to this website and read through more of this information. If you are dealing with like true domestic abuse or anything like that, of course, there are many different resources for you. So with the link that we sharing now, with being in emotionally abusive relationship, you can also find any type of support that you may be needing, and all of that information will be available on that link. So our new interactive podcast, we're going to be teaching more ways we are working through our complex PTSD, our codependency, and answering some of your relationship questions. So if this is something that interests you, be sure to sign up for the interactive podcast. We're going to be also giving you the information on how to sign up. And we're actually on our interactive podcast. We will continue to take polls. We will continue to read your comments, and we will continue to create content that is going to allow us to continue to grow together. So I think it was one comment under the poll saying to talk about anxiety and depression. And we added that into the podcast with this information. So thank you for everybody who voted on the poll. Thank you for everybody who actually, gave us your insight and just, kept it real with us about what you was dealing with. It is absolutely no shame in any of this. And we are reverse engineering the things that have caused us to not love ourselves unconditionally. So, a little bit from me. Sacred energy exchanges. Okay, this is how sex is supposed to happen, right? It's a sacred energy exchange. So sex is not just a physical thing, it's energetic. And our energy exchanges on the planet have been more so from a space of trauma. And if you have abandonment wounds, you may avoid, being in a relationship because you don't want to be let down or rejected, right? So in our relationship, Ernest's love attachment style was different from mine's. Mine's was more anxiety, anxious, preoccupied, where I would hyper focus on him and his needs and forget my own. But his wound was more so of the fearful avoidant, and he would avoid deep intimacy because it was uncomfortable. And hey, this relationship, what if it don't work like the last two? You know, and that was something we had to work through. And as an empath, I began to absorb his unprocessed trauma. And it took at least the last year for me to fully accept that I had been doing that unconsciously. So doing this consciously is energy work. It can be considered energy healing. But if you are not yet in a space where you're more integrated with these parts of yourself and you're not as judgmental and critical with these parts of yourself, and you're okay with somebody pointing out these parts of yourself, right? And you even point it out yourself, admit it, and work on it. What happens is the way he would respond to me would almost add another layer of trauma on top of the trigger, right? And because I was so codependent, if he wasn't in his highest vibration, then it was almost like it was wrong for me to be in my highest vibration. So if I was on the 21st floor in the spiritual awakening and that journey in that day, it changes from moment to moment, and he was on floor 17, I would go all the way down to floor 17, only to realize he was really in the basement about how he was feeling and didn't know he was feeling that bad. And I get down there in the basement, like, I thought you was on floor 17. He like, I am. I'm like, no, I just got off the elevator in the basement. No, I'm not in the basement. It's a pretty good day. Everything good. I'm great. Are you sure, baby? I'm great. I'm fine. Why would something be wrong? And I'm looking at his face like, but your face is telling me something is wrong. I see sadness in you. I see anger in you. I see like what's happening. And I had to learn that he was just unaware that he was unaware, right? So these things led to such profound realizations. And this is what inspired the podcast for tonight. And the reason that we are going to continue to share with y'all is because we feel like this is the conversation that's necessary for us to transcend the need for external validation, right? So that we can show up in our relationships with more confidence and not afraid to enforce our boundaries so that we feel safe, right? And even better, we learn how to be safe with each other. We learn how to respect each other's boundaries, right? And the hard lesson for me was letting go and allowing him to feel his feelings. I don't have a right to change how he feels. So there's an author with a book called Codependent No More. Well, Codependent Now What is the one that I'm currently reading. That book is by Lisa Romano. You can check her book out, her YouTube channel. I highly recommend it. I probably have commented on 90% of her videos because the synchronicities would be so in alignment. And it's really interesting that I took the more spiritual path in my personal development, but I also use the other informational videos and books, and I see this crossover between spiritual lessons, mythologies, deities, gods, goddesses, orishas, netarus. I see this crossover and I'm like, oh, so when you look at the whole of what we've talked about in the big picture, and you are in a space of healing these parts of you, then there is a deity or God, goddess that represents the archetype or energy of what you're dealing with, right? So if you are dealing with resentment, anger, betrayal, abandonment, and it's coming up because you hadn't processed it yet, you would be very similar to Medusa, where she was just rejected so much. It was like, forget this, being beautiful. No, I'm look, I'm straight, like I'm turning you in stone. And that's that part of you where it's just like, I'm gonna stop you in your tracks right now. Cause you know you doing too much and I don't really know how to enforce boundaries. So I'm just gonna get really, really angry and push you away from me because you're trying to be intimate with me, but I don't feel safe to be intimate with you. Right. So if any of this is new to you, we have, or if it's not, and you want to work through it on an energetic level, we have the Root Chakra Camp. It is an online camp retreat where you spend 10 days going through different exercises and ways to heal and restore balance within your chakras, these energy vortexes of yourself. And we also have the sacral camp, and we give you guidance every single day, exercises, and all types of tools to support you. And this also includes discount on products. So the link for that is going to be in the chat if it's not already.
Mhm.
And we also have the new Naga Saga coming up, where I'm going to connect to you why we resonate as star seeds, what galactic origins a lot of us have before incarnating here on the planet, and the reason it's showing up the way that it is now. And I don't want to split away too much now, but I really love to be able to approach things multidimensionally. And the social engineering and the eugenicists and so many of the things that we've experienced on the planet that have altered our brain's chemistry in the way that we exist in our tribes and our relationships and how we are with one another, as above, so below. This is an intergalactic thing that we're experiencing now. So a lot of us are seeing more spaceships. A lot of us are even seeing videos where you see laser beams being shot across the sun from one spaceship to the other. Like, we can log online now and watch this on the Soho radar, right? And I've shared a few of these on our Instagram. But we're seeing it now. And I just want you to remember that the cosmos is a reflection of what's inside of us, because we are the microcosm of the macrocosm. So in the new Naga Saga, it's so deep. I almost can't even wait to do this. It's so crazy. Just a few days ago, I wasn't really 100% confident in sharing some of this stuff because I wanted to benefit you. I don't want to offer people things that is just going to allow you to feel comfortable in a small place where you can actually evolve, expand, and grow, right? So I stayed up for almost 17 hours channeling the information. I'm taking everything that you have heard tonight and crossing it over with why star seeds are here, why we are highly empathic, and why we are being triggered so much, and why time is speeding up. And it's so imperative and important that we tap into the deeper aspect of the microcosm. So if that interests you, the link to buy your tickets will be in the chat. Y'all already know that we got major surprises and gifts and freebies and all of that. We are bringing the elder to the city who is the Baba for so many of us, that gave us a new language and a new way of communicating, thinking, and being. Dr. Blind, the author of The Functionary himself in the flesh, will be with us for the new Naga Saga metaphysical meetup. And he has some stuff that has never been released before that he wants to share. You will also receive a free t-shirt for purchasing your new Naga Saga ticket. And we want you to be able to wear your message to let people know I am clearing and healing negativity that transcends just my bloodline, but multidimensional. And I'm healing children and grandchildren that I haven't even had yet. It's really that powerful. Generational healing means that it's multidimensional. And it's a couple other things, of course, you know.
As always.
So get your tickets because you don't want to miss out. We only have a few of these. So the first few people to get their tickets will be able to get these freebies, these gifts, this merch. And on top of that, we have the Chocolate City t-shirts available for purchase. Dr. Blind has not put these t-shirts out in 22 years. Matter of fact, since the year 2000, Y2K, is when he made those shirts. And Prince, the artist himself, wanted that shirt so much, and George Clinton gave it to him. So this is epic. When we say big pyramid shit, what we mean is each person healing these things within themselves. It allows us to come together to create a foundation, anchoring a new frequency on the planet so that we can leave the world better than what it was when we incarnated here. That's what we doing. Big pyramid shit. Big brick by brick. And every day we finding a new way to make the bomb tick. And these dust is just blowing up every day. I'm telling you, we've been getting triggered so much, just walking ticking time bombs. And it's like, how in the hell you and Ernest stay together? This is how we stay together. This is what we do. And we want to extend this to y'all. So I don't think I missed anything. April, if I missed anything, if you could just drop it in the chat for everybody. I think that I went over everything. Did anybody have any questions? We can take one question tonight just because we said that we would and we are in integrity and keeping our word. Does anybody have a question that you would like to drop in the chat? You can do that now. And in a moment, we will address your question before we end tonight. And while you are doing that, can you also tell us what your biggest takeaway was? Like, what are you feeling from this?
Thank you, April.
Sometimes I toot my own horn and I be like, shit, I'm feeling this. So what y'all feeling? Like, is this resonating? You got any takeaways? What you taking home? And as y'all are processing that and posting that, I also want to say this too, because I wasn't going to squeeze this in, but I do feel like it's important. I've been getting emails, and I know that some of you have been dealing with sexual attacks at night in your sleep. It could be exes, it could be people you never met before, whoever, whatever. It seems like that's been happening a lot lately. So in the new Naga Saga and in NUUMS Mystery School tomorrow night at 7 p.m., if I'm not mistaken, I'm gonna tell you how I deal with those sexual attacks in my sleep, because it just seems like it's a lot of information floating around and people are not really sure what the most effective thing is and how to deal with it. So I'm going to be getting into that. And not only are we going to get into that, but we're going to give a free obsidian crystal. It is polished, beautiful obsidian crystal that can be used to communicate with these repressed parts of yourself, to communicate with your wounded inner child that may be very afraid to really communicate with you because maybe there are some negative energies still attached to you inside of your own mind that doesn't allow your wounded inner child to feel comfortable expressing him or herself with you. Again, this part of you lives inside of you. So from now on, view yourself like a Russian doll. The doll, and it's another doll that goes inside of that doll, and it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. We have all of these aspects that live inside of us. You get older chronologically, but the inner child never goes away. And so obsidian is one of the most powerful crystals. It absorbs negative energy. And I'm going to be teaching how to use it if this is happening to you. And for those of us who experience any type of sexual abuse throughout our lifetime, and even just being a woman, you can feel not safe just being a woman. And I can remember not feeling safe going to the swimming pool because I had bigger boobs than most girls my age. So when I went to the swimming pool, I felt very uncomfortable. It was too much attention. And things as simple as that can put us in a space where we're a vibrational match for these sexual psychic attacks at night. But they're not always negative either. Sometimes you are going through a period of abstaining and healing yourself and not dealing with anybody else physically on an intimate level. And this happens to you, and it's just a way for you to have those endorphins and have serotonin and dopamines and oxytocin created inside you. So it's not always negative. Nothing in this world is black and white. Nothing in this world is good and bad. Everything in this world is beneficial. or harmful. And sometimes things can actually be both. So this is the 5D reality experience. So that's what we're doing in NUUMS Mystery School. And I'm so excited. I cannot wait to share with you how I have been figuring out how to deal with these things. And not even that, but again, a free obsidian crystal that's pre-polished, so smooth that you can see everything in it and it repels negativity. Come on now. Like, that right there is something I wish I would have known about 10, 15 years ago, you know? And so, everyone that enrolls in that class within the next 2 weeks of hearing this podcast will receive a free obsidian scrying mirror. And it's not, we can't do it for everybody. So if it's resonating, go ahead and sign up tonight so that you can meet up with us tomorrow and we can dive deeper into some of these sexual psychic attacks. And actually, you can take that situation, harness the energy, and allow it to be a deep healing moment, which allows you to transcend your trauma. And you will find yourself really, really having the ability to emotionally regulate yourself. And it will not be connected to what's happening to you in the present or the past. You will be more linked to the future you are creating by the way that you experience your present moment. So, was any questions that we have, or anybody have anything they want to say before we got off? A lot of people relating. I see you. Shout out to you, Latasha. Thank you for letting us know that you resonate. Yeah, and recognizing have the difficulties in communication. Yeah. This stuff is so normal, y'all. It's so normal. And look at the amount of people who are attracted to this information. That just show you how powerful this is to be living in this time right now. And so many other things you could have been doing. You chose to do this and invest in yourself, and that's profound and amazing. And so watch out tomorrow, because tomorrow, once you connect with the energy that is carrying that 5D way of perceiving things, is definitely going to alter how many synchronicities you see, how many spirit guides you interact with. And you just probably, even if you're not into all the spiritual stuff, you'll just be more understanding of your own self and why you behave or, you know, be in your relationship with yourself and with other people. Um, so okay, no questions. All right. Well, if y'all enjoyed this, share this with somebody else. The next podcast is going to be on Mighty Networks, where I can get a little bit more dirty. It's just something that feels so good inside of me when I can get juicy and dirty and butt naked and just tell y'all some shit. And y'all be like, I cannot believe that Campson said that. And then, the people who appreciate, like, thank you so much for saying that. I think it, I just never had the courage to say it out loud. So yeah, the next episode is going to be on Mighty Networks, and we're going to be taking any of your questions, and you will actually be able to get free relationship advice from us. And all you have to do is join Mighty Networks, and we have marked it down. It will only be $22 a month, just now starting off, to get going, because we want you all to be able to experience how transformational these practices are and how it can alter your reality. So if you did the quantum jump with us when we did the wormhole meditation in January of 2022, you already know. If you did the Sirius Starseed meditation with us for the Lioness Gate portal, you already know. When we come to bring what is profound, what is powerful, so that we are able to transcend our traumas and our triggers. So let's see who go get these first shirts. Dr. Blind said that he gonna be doing autographed copies for people that come to the New Naga Saga. So make sure that you go ahead and get your tickets, because we're gonna put your name in a raffle, and we're gonna pull names for people to win some of the special prizes we'll be giving away at the New Naga Saga as well. And that link is also in the chat. All right. So we're gonna get ready to slide out of here. No questions. I'm feeling good about this. My biggest takeaway from this is I don't have to judge myself. We're all human. We all have shadows and imperfections, and we are all expecting with great expectation to create a paradigm shift. And I know that you feel the pressure. And I know that you feel like sometimes it's overwhelming and too much. And that's why we created the sacred space so that we could do this work together. So if you join the camps, if you come to the class in NUUMS tomorrow or New Naga Saga, know that you are in a tribe of people like-minded who are committing themselves to changing the world by starting with themselves and the man in the mirror. All right. We're gonna go out with Ogun. This is our new song. We got some others. We got a live performance coming for the new Naga Saga. So make sure that y'all get your tickets and pull up. We can't wait. You'll never guess what we're gonna do. We're gonna make this shit fun. It's breaking up. Thank you, Latasha. I'm not sure why that's happening. That's all right. We're gonna make sure we got the music up for y'all too. We got y'all. Anybody else having audio issues? I show y'all. So we're not sure why the sound went out. People said the sound went out for them. Some people didn't, but that's okay. We're gonna make sure everything is available for you. We love y'all so much. Pull up, y'all. Do it for yourself. Don't do it for us. Do it for you.